Hello everybody out there in Mathland. For today's math lesson, we will be measuring length up to a ½ inch. That means that for today's lesson, you're going to need a ruler. If you do not have a ruler at home, which is possible, I emailed all of your parents a paper ruler that you can print out and cut. If you do not have a printer that you can do this with and you have no ruler at home, you can take measuring. If you have measuring tape at the house, you can take measuring tape with a piece of paper and mark off those inches so that you can use it as a ruler. So there's various things that you can do to try to make that work. I went ahead and printed out the ruler that I sent out in the email and I cut it out. It is 12 inches. It is accurate. See, there you go. So I'm going to use this to measure. I am going to start on page 662 to show you how this works. Not all objects are whole numbers of inches long. You can use a ruler to measure length to the nearest ½ inch. Remember to line up the end of the object with 0. Here's what that means. Not all rulers start directly at the 0 line. Some have like a little extra space, so you cannot start measuring there. For example, let's look at this ruler. I do not put the edge of the ruler next to my measuring line. I put it on this line, which is the 0 line. Okay, so here's an example of a ruler. They started measuring here, so from here to here, that's 1 whole inch, but in between, there's a ½ inch. So this is a ½ inch. In between 1 and 2, there's 1 1/2 inches, okay? So you can measure things up to a half. Now, for example, we have this string right here. Measure the length of each string to the nearest ½ inch. The string is 3/2 of an inch long. You can also represent the length as 1 whole inch and 1/2 inch or 1.5 inches. So for example, since this is a ½ inch, this is 2/2, and this is 3/2, like if I was looking at a number line. So you can represent that as either 3/2 or 1.5 inches. Over here, this one right here, sometimes you have to go to the closest possible measurement because it doesn't go exactly to a ½ inch or a whole inch. This string right here stops about there, so it's closest to that ½ inch mark. So we say that this string is about ½ inch. So sometimes we're gonna have to make those little adjustments. We're gonna be using this sometimes to make line plots, which we talked about earlier this week. So measure the length of each line to the nearest ½ inch, then record each length on the line plot. So the title right here will be line lengths. And as you can see, these measurements are gonna go up by halves. So that's 0, ½ inch, 1 whole inch, 1.5 inches, 2 inches. Okay, let's start measuring these lines, okay? I'm gonna take my ruler and I'm gonna put the 0 line as close as I can to the beginning of that line here, you see? Oh, I'm so sorry, since it's paper, it moves around. Here's my 0 line, and it lines up with the beginning of this, and it goes up to the ½ inch mark. ½ inch mark. So that means that this particular one is ½ inch. Let's look at the next one. I'm going to put my ruler up into the beginning right here, 0. And it looks like it goes up to 1.5 inches. So 1.5. See, it's between 1 and 2, so it's 1.5. Over here. It looks right here, I started my 0 line, that it stops at 1 whole inch. That's 1 whole inch. And then for this one, right here, it's as close as it can be to this 1.5 inch. So it's 1.5 inches. Now that I know the measurements for all of them, I say, okay, how many were just ½ inch? One of them, so 1x. How many were just 1 inches? One of them, so 1x. And there were 2 that were 1.5. So 1.5, 1.5. And that's how you would make your measurements. Okay? Awesome. Give me 1 second real quick. Okay. My teaching book is telling me that this is different. I don't know how it is different, but this is what I think is correct because there's these 4 lines and I'm measuring it right here. So I'm going to stick with my answers are correct. Now it says measure the length of each line to the nearest half inch, then record each length on the line. Oh, okay, so that's why it is. We're going to then do these and then add these to the line plot we already made. Now I understand. Okay, so measure the length of each line to the nearest half inch, then record each length on the line plot above. So right here, I'm going to go measure from my 0 line. And it looks like it goes up to about 1.5 inches. Over here, gonna line these up, and it looks like it goes out to about a whole inch. And then over here, it goes a little bit further than 1/2 inch, so I'm gonna call it 1/2 inch. So now I take these measurements and I add them to the x's that I have here. This is 1.5, so I add an x here. This is 1 inch, so I add an x there, and this is 1/2 inch. So I add an it to that one. Now I understand why the x's look like that in my book. Okay, we're gonna go over here. Measure the length of each line to the nearest 1/2 inch and record each length on the line plot. So that means that once again, for this new line plot, my title is gonna be line lengths. Is going 1/2 inch up each time. So 0, 1/2 inch, whole inch, 1.5 inches, 2 inches. Now let's start measuring. Over here, 0 to here, that's 1 inch. This one, 0 to over here. About 1.5 inches, because we have to go to and about, so 1.5 inches. Over here, it's almost at the 1 inch mark, so I'm gonna call this a 1 incher. Over here, oh cool, look at this one. This one, this is 1.5, I'm gonna call it 1.5 inches again, almost 2. I'm actually gonna call that 2 inches because it was very close. This one right here is 1/2 inch. Oh, there you go. This one is very close to 2 whole inches. I'm gonna call it 2 whole inches. And then this one is right at 2. So it's another 2 whole inches. So now, 3 of my measurements were at 2. 1 of my measurements was at 1.5. 2 were at 1 whole inch. And there was 1 lonely 1/2 inch. There we go. How might the scale change if the length of the line below is recorded on the line plot? Well, this line looks longer. This line looks, let's see, goes from 0 right here to about 3 1/2. Well, that means that the scale would have to go longer to go to 3 1/2. It would have to keep going that way. That's how the scale would change. Let's go here. So, measure the length of each toy to the nearest 1/2 inch, then record each length on the line plot. So these are toy lengths. Let's start with 0, 1/2 inch, a whole inch, 1.5, 2 whole inches, 2.5, and 3 inches. That is the scale that I'm doing. Going up by 1/2 inch because we're measuring by 1/2 inches. So we have this little Lego block here. Okay. This one starts at a 0 line and goes just a tiny bit after 2, so I'm going to call it 2 inches. This little dinosaur, Spinosaur, it goes from 0 right here to 2.5. So 2.5 inches. Then over here, for this red block, they're here to about 2. So I'm going to call it 2 inches. This little puzzle piece is just very little. It's only 1/2 inch. And this little toy car is about 1 inch. See, 0 to 1. So now that I have my measurements done, I have to plot them on my line. I only have 1.5, only 1 1/2 inch, 2 for 2 inches, and 1 for 2.5 inches. There we go. All right. Last page. Measure the length of 10 crayons and record each line. Well, you're gonna have to find your own crayons to do that. You can do that if you want at home, but for right now, I'm not gonna do that. It'll take too much time. So I'm gonna go over here. Measure the length of 10 shoes to the nearest 1/2 inch and record each length on the left foot. So once again, you're gonna have to find shoes at home to do this. But let me explain, for example, something that you could do here, because then it says, what is the length of the longest shoe and what is the length of the shortest shoe? So you would have to see what you put over here and what you put over there, and what length shoe is the most common. Wherever you had the most X's, that would be the most common length. For your homework, I'll make sure that I don't pick questions that'll make you go around your house to measure stuff. I'll just pick the questions that all the measurements are right there so you can do them. Be very careful with your homework today. Make an adult check it before you submit it. You should be doing that every time anyway. Make sure that you print out this ruler if you need to, or use a ruler at home, or make a ruler out of taking a measuring tape and putting it against the paper to make those measurements, okay? Alrighty, I hope you have a good day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.